So welcome back to now Behind the Tip. Today we're talking about the characters in Liberte. Now the last time we talked about how the game mechanics really brings the history of the French Revolution alive. Today we'll be talking about the characters on the cards, and usually on the cards you see three things. It shows that what usually in the province that he affected in that part of history, and his faction that he was affiliated with, be it radical, Giordano moderate, or royalist, and also his picture and his name. Now this is somewhat extracted, and that's totally understandable. Martin Wallace, you can imagine if he made a game that each of the cards literally showed the guy's history, it will be quite a task. So it's somewhat extracted but totally understandable. And the reason why I'm doing characters today is because what happens when you play is that if you actually know the characters, it actually brings out a lot of theme. Example, if you're playing, the most famous character in the game is basically Napoleon. And when someone gets Napoleon, you know, you can always see it, they usually say something, right? Or either when they put it down, they say, example, this would be a Waterloo or something like that. And it, you know, the fact that you know the character just makes it so much more thematic. So that's what I hope to do today. I'll talk about some very famous characters in the French Revolution and some not so. And what I hope is that as you play, next time when you pick up a card like Marat or something, you know, you have some history to share with the group, and also it just brings the flavor of the game alive. So let's get into it. Now the first character is the Marquis de Lafayette. Now he was a French aristocrat who, when the American Revolution, alright, started, what he did was he actually sailed to America and actually joined to fight with the Americans for the ideals of democracy. And he got on really well with Washington, and by all accounts it said that he treated him like a son. And so of course, having fought with the most famous person at the time, the most famous democratic revolution, when he came back to France, of course he had a name for himself, and he actually supported, of course, the French Revolution, and he after that became a general in the French army. Now if you see my last video, you know that a lot of the generals were aristocrats, just like the Marquis de Lafayette. And like I said, also the National Assembly always got very wary of generals who got too powerful, and the Marquis de Lafayette was one of these guys. The radicals in the National Assembly in fact wanted his arrest. So what happened? The Marquis de Lafayette got hold of this information, he ran away and got caught by the Austrians. He was jailed for 5 years, and then what in the end happened, he left France, you know. And at one point they even asked him to come back to be dictator of France, not during the French Revolution, you know, but during, probably after Napoleon. And he didn't do it, obviously, because he must have felt very estranged from the whole French Revolution, seen as the terror, the Great Terror, and after that Napoleon becoming emperor. So that was that. But I gotta say personally that sounds like an absolutely sincere individual. The fact that this is a guy who had all the benefits of being an aristocrat, he gave up all of that to go and fight and risk his life for revolution, for the ideals, and he was willing to give up his own benefits for others. So, you know, praise to the Marquis de Lafayette. The next is Marat. Now Marat is, I like what the documentary says about him and Thomas Paine, that they are professional malcontents. Now Thomas Paine, if you know American history, was the guy who wrote Common Sense, and what he was to the American Revolution, Marat was that to the French Revolution. Now both people had a similar thing. They failed somewhat in life, and they basically became very angry and they needed someone to blame, and of course that period they chose the monarchy. In Marat's case, what happened was that he used to be a doctor, so he wasn't as much a failure as Thomas Paine. But what happened was that Marat then afterwards, when he was refused to enter the Academy of Science in Paris, he got in some altercation and the police went after him. Now during his flight, he actually somehow contracted a very painful skin disease, and which resulted in most of his time needed to be spent in a medicated bath in a bathtub. You know, and then when the French Revolution started, he decided to start a newspaper called The People's Friend, and simply his idea of a newspaper was to exaggerate everything and to basically report stuff for his own goals. And so what happens is that usually the news always went one way, you know. this list of names. We need to kill them for the stability of the revolution. And that will happen. And then the next time he came with another one, he would say that, you know what? This bad situation happened because we didn't kill enough people the last time. So we gotta do that. And that really went on. And that led to a lot of deaths. I mean, a lot. Marat was pretty much an instigator of a lot of hatred and deaths in the revolution, especially by the guillotine. In fact, he was the guy who named the apparatus guillotine after, of course, Guillotin. What happened later on was that he had open door policy to meet people, to submit names of traitors and everything. And one of these people who came to visit him was a lady by the name of Charlotte Corday. Now, what she came to see was that it was Marat who was causing all these situations of so many innocent people being killed, and she felt that if she could only remove Marat, then the killing would stop, or rather be reduced by quite a bit. So what she did was she went to Paris, alright, and during the open door policy, she went to see Marat. And when she got close enough, she took a stiletto, which is a short pointed knife, and stabbed him to death. And that was the end of Marat. Strangely, to the irony of it, she didn't exactly make the situation better, because when the radicals heard of Marat's death, instead what they did was they glorified him. He literally became a martyr for the French Revolution. And you can see that in paintings and stuff like that. And they worshipped him suddenly so much that they even took the bathtub he was in and put it onto an altar. So it had an ironic effect to what she wanted to achieve. And you still have to give it to Charlotte Corday. She was very brave. She literally knew she was going to lose her life. In fact, when she stabbed Marat, she didn't try to run away. She just waited there for the police to... And by all accounts, she died in a very brave fashion. But it is very weird and ironic how life turns out that the thing she was trying to prevent kind of got enhanced a bit with the death of Marat. Although the newspaper did end. The next person we're going to talk about is Danton. He was the Minister of Justice for the National Assembly. And he was the guy who was one of the biggest proponents of people, along with Robespierre, of people joining the army to support France, the Republic. And strangely, compared to his counterpart, he was almost the exact opposite of Robespierre, whereas Robespierre would be more or less considered an introvert. By nature, Danton was very much an extrovert. In fact, many call him a debaucher. He was interested in women, wine, and having a good time. And he was very much an extrovert in that he got along with people very much. And he was very boisterous, it was said of him. But as much as it's weird to say, between Robespierre, the introvert, and Danton, the extrovert, you would think that between the two of these radicals, the more radical one would probably be the extrovert. And that's not true. In fact, after the terror period, it was Danton's group, or the Dantonese, who came out and said that the terror should stop, that they achieved what they wanted and they should stop. It was actually Robespierre that wanted to carry on and what would become the Great Terror. And it's literally because of this conflict that Robespierre got the Danton and the Dantonese arrested, and in the end got them guillotined as traitors. And here's the cool part about how manly Danton is. It was, before he was executed, he actually turned to the executioner and he said, "Show my head to the people. It will be something to see." So that just gives you a sign of how confident this man was in his own ability, and truth be told, a very manly thing to do in the face of death. The next individual is Collot d'Herbois. Now, this is a classic example of why you do not judge a book by its cover. Before the French Revolution, Collot d'Herbois, he was an actor and playwright, and nothing in the public records of him shows that he was sadistic or he was of any kind of unmerciful nature. But he had basically joined the Sans Culottes, and when the Sans Culottes felt that the National Assembly wasn't doing enough for the revolution, what happened is they broke in and they demanded that one of their faction be able to join the leading leaders of the revolution. And this person was of course Collot. And even compared to Maximilian, when Maximilian could not deal with the situation in Leon, he in fact had chose Collot d'Herbois to settle the situation. And When Collot got there, you know, and keeping with his son Colette roots, he was unmerciful. It was a total massacre, and he killed a lot of people, you know, very ruthlessly. And his end came when Robespierre was put out of power, which we'll talk about later. He too fell out of favor, and they wanted to go after him. He managed to escape death, and for the rest of his life, you know, he fell out of favor. He tried to get back in government, but somewhat unsuccessfully, and died of yellow fever. Now, the next person we're going to talk is, of course, the most famous person in the French Revolution. If you exclude, of course, the Empire of France under Napoleon, which is Maximilien de Robespierre, and which I got to say is one of the best, coolest names ever. You know, it just flows off the tongue. And to me, he epitomizes the life, in a way, of irony. He was basically born, and through his natural abilities and intellect, he rose up. And the first irony was that when he was a young boy, during the coronation of Louis XVI and his first visit to Paris, it was the young Robespierre as a boy who gave the welcome Latin address to Louis XVI. The same boy who's giving the Latin address now would be, in years to come, the man who would give and agree to kill the king. So that's the first irony. The second and third irony of Robespierre was that he was a big believer in Rousseau and all the ideals of that part of revolutionary thought or Enlightenment thought, and he was totally against the death penalty and censorship. In fact, the full reason the French Revolution came about was because their views were not able to be put down, you know, free speech and everything. And as the period went on, you know, Robespierre, when he came into power, he not only took on the ideals that, you know, the death penalty was necessary for the French Revolution, he also implemented, again, censorship. And on the death penalty, when it was asked on why his sudden flip on the, you know, ideals of the death penalty, he basically just came out and said, times have changed, you know. So that's the second and third irony of this man. But let's stop a while and talk about him. Was he sincere? That, I gotta say, I think it is. By many accounts, it was said that Robespierre lived a very simple life. He, you know, and he was very much a very quiet person, you know, minus when he was speaking on his great speeches, and he was a great orator. But one of the accounts I always liked, this one, was that talked about him, said that one of his only indulgences in life was, you know, eating sweet fruit. Don't quote me on this, but I think it was oranges. I do believe that he sincerely believed the ideals of revolution, although he just got very fixated, you know, almost obsessed. And so obsessed with the ideals that he kept trying to achieve these goals, that, and also the fact that he did not indulge in a lot of corruption in the way, of course, of bribes and everything, that he got called the incorruptible. But he reminds me of people who are obsessed with games like Civilization or like Shogun Total War, you know, Rome Total War, where, you know, these big games that takes hours and hours and hours to play. And you know how you always say, like, one more turn. That was Robespierre. You know, he kept feeling that. You can tell, because he just kept feeling like, if I only kill 10 more people, I can stop. And then I'll kill 10 more, but then the situation just didn't solve. So it's like always like that obsessive kind of behavior, which is one more turn. And that was Robespierre to me. Does that mean because he killed a lot of people, he wasn't sincere? No, he was, I feel, very sincere to the ideals of it. It's just that he deluded himself and he didn't know control after he started. His downfall came about when he felt that France had removed Catholicism, and what happened was that he felt that people needed a guiding light, so they needed a new religion. But here's the thing: France, the Republic, was secular, so he didn't ask anybody to worship a god. Instead, what he put up was more of a, think of it like you're worshipping logic, all right? And someone just needed an ideal to aspire to. And of course, he put up that ideal, which is basically the ideals of the revolution. And its prophet was, well, him. With him draped in a toga on top of a huge monument of papier-mâché, mountain and a statue and all of that. And that was when people started to say, well, this guy's kind of off his rocker. And when people started to voice dissent, to control them, what he thought he could do was he came into the National Assembly and he held up a list, and this was his mistake. He said he had a new list of traitors that needed to be removed from but he was not going to reveal them. So he went away, and here's the problem. The National Assembly people who have survived all those killings up to now, they weren't going to take a risk. Instead, what they did was that they turned on him and asked for his arrest before he could release those names. Alright? Because they probably saw what happened to Danton and everything and knew that no one was safe. And so they went after him first, and according to which account you read, one says that when guards burst into his room, 2 musket shots were fired and 1 hit Robespierre in the mouth. The other states that when the people burst in, Robespierre had attempted suicide and shot himself in the mouth. Personally, I felt that more mathematically it was more likely that he attempted suicide but failed, you know, because of the whole inaccuracy of muskets at the time. But the big takeaway on the irony of it was that here was this man who epitomized the terror and the Great Terror through his, and to a certain extent the revolution, with his speeches, and that too was his mouth, and now it was shattered. And the Great Terror ended, and for the most part the revolution in terms of the ideals of a republic ended with his life when he was guillotined. And that period afterwards, of course, leading to people wanting stability and basically under the control of what would come, of course, of Napoleon. So, a great life in irony, but a very interesting one at that, you know. So that was some of the great and interesting characters in Liberte. Now, there are a lot of others, but I felt that these are few that really gives the biggest flavor in Liberte. So I hope it helps and enhances your play of Liberte. Thank you very much. Till next word.